Liam, you were obviously reflecting earlier that there was no mention of the autumn statement, the higher tax burden, and all the other issues that, of course, are worried business, who some of them calling about this doom loop of increasing taxes and stagnant growth in the economy, stagflation, as we've heard.
So doom loop is a concept that the Labour Party have picked up and are running with, and it could be quite an effective political message because it chimes with the concerns of a lot of people in financial markets and a lot of people in business. What it means is that when an economy is already slowing, and we know, Mark, from the Office for Budget Responsibility and from the Office for National Statistics, the economy did contract between July and September. If it contracts again, and it looks as if it is, between October and December, that's recession, the two subsequent quarters, two consecutive quarters of growth contraction. And the OBR is saying there's going to be contraction in 2023 as well, with the economy getting 1.4% smaller. If you raise taxes sharply into the teeth of a slowdown, you may make that slowdown even deeper. Then the government gets less tax revenue on less business activity. There's more spending on benefits and so on, helping vulnerable households amidst that slowdown. So the fiscal position gets even worse. That's what the doom loop concept is. And I think this is a genuine concern. Why do I think that? Because after this autumn statement last week, the government's borrowing costs on financial markets, those gilt yields that we've all become so expert in over recent weeks, they actually went up. Even though the government was saying, look, we're doing the virtuous thing, we're raising taxes in order to plug a fiscal hole.
Yeah, and that phrase, doom loop, was used by Tony Danker, the Secretary-General of the CBI, which is interesting in itself. And he's also said, look, we need to talk about migration because we need perhaps more workers with particular skills to come in and try and get this growth going in the economy, because that's the worry. They're saying there are no signs of the economy growing.
Look, migration in the UK is generally 250, 300, 350,000 people net a year. More people than that come in, but of course lots of people leave as well, not least older people going to retire elsewhere and so on. We've got more people born in the European Union now working in the UK than we had before Brexit. So it's not as if there's a gap in the labour market because of Brexit. There's a gap in the labour market because 1.5 million people, Mark, have completely left the workforce, even though they're of working age. And that's the result of lockdown. Yeah. We've also got skills shortages, which have been endemic in the UK for a long time. So it's no wonder that business groups, employment groups like the Confederation of British Industry do want more immigration. And I think Rishi Sunak wants that too. But, of course, he was at pains to point out that you have to stem this tide of people coming over on small boats, not least because they're illegal, but also their own safety is threatened, and that encourages so-called people trafficking. And it could easily be a security risk, the Prime Minister said. So he's trying to sort of get a balance. You need a bit more immigration to keep the economy moving, but he can't allow a free-for-all because that would be deeply unpopular.
And they've got to have this skills base to actually answer particular demands in the economy. But where are we with this sort of story that erupted from the Sunday papers about a Swiss-style return to the EU, a sort of semi-detached link to the EU?
Well, the Prime Minister tried to fend this story off by talking lots about innovation, and that's a kind of perennial theme of the British economy. We're very good at inventing in this country. Many entrepreneurial, technological geniuses in this country. You know, this country invented the internet, many people would say, as well as the Industrial Revolution.
The hovercraft.
We've got a real tradition of inventing things. What is innovation? Innovation is the implementation of inventions. And you implement inventions by getting money behind them and capital behind them. We're not very good at innovation. A lot of other countries, particularly the US, traditionally have taken our inventions and turned them to serious commercial advantage. So the Prime Minister tried to get us talking about that debate, but of course a lot of the broadcasters in the question and answer session came back and said, oh, there's
what
fears.
About Switzerland?
There's fears that you're not a real Brexiteer and you want to take the UK not back into the European Union at this stage, but have a more kind of sort of hybrid relationship with the European Union in the way the Swiss do.
Yeah, and that was all about trade deals, but you were just explaining what we're actually, in terms of trade deals, they maybe are not that vital, because clearly there was some concern that we hadn't got some deal with the United States on free trade with the USA.
An awful lot of nonsense talked about trade deals. It's not as if you can't trade with countries if you haven't got a trade deal, because there are generic rules that apply across international trade.
And that gas we're getting from the States, because that's private companies that we're dealing with.
Of course, you don't need a trade deal to trade. There's something called the World Trade Organization, which sets the legal framework. It's got courts, arbitration mechanisms. It's very, very complex and comprehensive. Most trade in the world goes on outside trade deals, right? America doesn't, have a trade deal with the EU. And America doesn't have a trade deal with the UK for now, but I think the UK is far more likely to get a trade deal with the UK, with the US, than the EU is, because the EU's 27 countries, they've all got their own agendas. It's very, very difficult to negotiate with. But I think it's important to say that a lot of people, particularly conservative backbenchers, feel that a lot of the advantages of Brexit haven't been implemented yet. Liz Truss's investment zones, a lot of people thought they were a good idea. They're possible outside the European Union. You can set lower rates of tax in particular parts of the country. That's very difficult to do under European Union rules. But, on the other hand, so much of Brexit is stymied by the ongoing hiatus, if you like, when it comes to Northern Ireland. That issue has not been resolved. A lot of people would say because of EU intransigence. Opponents of Brexit would say because Brexit is unimplementable.